Hi, friends. Welcome to the Pain-Free Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Welton, a certified doula, childbirth educator, and mother of three. In this space, we'll hear positive, supernatural, and yes, even pain-free birth stories from women just like you. We'll explore the deeply spiritual side of childbirth and how God designed women's bodies brilliantly for birth. Let's get started. Welcome back to the show, mamas. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Jennifer and Harif Hazera, who is a couple that took my course, and I met them when they recognized me in the crowd at a Tony Robbins event last year in December. And they said, "Oh my gosh, you're Karen Welton. We took your course. It changed our life. We have to tell you our story." And I said, I have to bring you on the podcast to share with my listeners what you have to say about your birth, because you had a medicated hospital birth and then took my course and had a completely different natural physiological home birth, mostly pain-free. And I especially am excited as well to talk to Harif, because you gave such a beautiful example of the dad's perspective in all of this. And so welcome to the show, Jennifer and Harif.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be here and to get to share our story.
Yes, thank you for having us.
I'm so excited. I rarely get to interview the couple, but you both made such an impression on me. And I felt like it was really important to highlight the dad's voice as well in this, because so often we hear the birth story from the mother, and your birth story is nothing short of incredible. But I really love having the dad's perspective as well, and what it did for you as a father and a husband to see the changes that happened in your wife.
Yes, it's one of the things that doesn't get talked about often during birth stories. Dads kind of get phased out in the background, so to speak, and we don't really know what to do in those moments. But it truly was an opportunity for us to experience something sacred together that we didn't get to experience with our first son. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear both your perspectives, and especially if any mamas out there are listening and trying to convince your husband to have a home birth or a natural birth, or go all in and invest in the course. Like, I think this will be a beautiful testimony of what God can do in the whole family, in your marriage, and through childbirth, through the birth of your child, that it can bring you closer together, not split you apart as it can in many situations. So tell us a little bit first about your first birth and what that was like, that you kind of then decided to make some changes with your second one.
Yeah. So with the first birth, I was just fully prepared to do nothing and go into the hospital and let them tell me what to do and how to have this baby. They do this all the time, right? Like they don't need my help. And so then we had a friend who really pushed us to like get a doula. She's like, "No, you need a doula." So we did that, and it was helpful in a lot of ways, and just kind of preparing us for what was going to be happening with my body, basically. But when we were at the hospital, she was wonderful in many ways, but looking back, I realized that she didn't really advocate for us in a lot of the ways that I now know to advocate for myself, or, to encourage others to advocate for themselves. I had decided ahead of time that I was going to get the epidural, and people would even say, "Well, do you want to try without it?" And I was like, "Why would you even suggest something so silly when we have this like modern medicine?" And to be perfectly honest with you, I was 36 when we had our first. Most of my friends already had many kids, or at least one. And I can't really tell you anybody who told me a negative birth story until after I had my hospital birth, and then started sharing, where I'm like, all these crazy, like really difficult things happen. And then people were like, "Yeah, same here." And I'm like, but like nobody talked about it, and nobody warned me, to be honest with you. That's how I felt. But I think it's just because everybody sees it as so normal. So I was like, well, of course I'm going to get the epidural. I've never heard of a bad experience with this. I'm going to do it. It doesn't make sense not to. So I did, even though I was progressing like very well. I think I was dilating at least when we got there, like 4. Like 4.
There, yeah.
And then it was like 5 the next hour, then 6, then 7, then 8. And then I was like, well, this seems like a good time because I was really tired. I hadn't slept in like 2 days. Looking back after taking your course, I think I was in labor for like 2 days and I didn't realize it because it really wasn't that bad. And then once I got there and, fast forward, like 6-7 hours later, I was so tired. And then they like wouldn't let me eat. So I was like, I need a break. So I got the epidural and then I just slept for hours and hours and hours.
That's a great use of an epidural, by the way, to just sleep. No judgment.
I was like, this is amazing. Yeah. And he was watching the contractions and he was like, oh, you just had one. I was like, I did? I was like, oh, this is so much better than feeling it. This is so great.
Temporary pleasure, long-term pain.
Yeah. Because what I didn't know is I was progressing very well. And what they didn't mention was like, your baby's still going to be trying to get out, but like you're going to be sleeping. So he was trying to get out like really hard. And I didn't know because I didn't feel anything. So I'm probably going to get emotional because like I didn't realize like what it was doing to him, and like looking back, it's like he was trying so hard to get out and I had no idea. And then like they came rushing in like a movie. It was like a movie. Like I was sleeping and I woke up and there was like 5 nurses and they were like rushing around and they like gave me a shot, which I now know was to stop the contractions. And that's all she said. She's like, this is going to help your baby. And she like put it in and like said that, I don't even think she told me what it was for. She just said it was going to help the baby. And so it stopped my contractions. And a part that I skipped was that after the epidural, they gave me Pitocin. And I at first said I didn't want it. And I remember the nurse kind of was like, okay, like, so what do you want to do then? And I was like, can I just wait? And she said, okay, yeah. Like, and so we're like, okay, come back in an hour. And then she came back and I still wasn't progressing, I think because of the epidural. So when she came back, I was like, okay, I guess it's okay. But they didn't make me do it, but I did feel like a little bit of pressure, So I was like, okay, well, I think they know better, than I do. And they said like, it's better for my baby. So they gave me a low dose of Pitocin and that's what started like the contractions harder. But again, I was still sleeping. I didn't know.
Yeah. And baby doesn't have an epidural. It feels the full effect of those contractions pounding on them.
Right. And because I didn't know and I wasn't working with my body, like I do wish they would have said like, hey, like don't go to sleep, even though you can't feel it, maybe watch the monitor or maybe like do something. But instead they're like, here you go. Okay, bye. And then I was, then they rushed back in, I don't know how long later, it might've been a couple hours, and they give me the shot, they put oxygen on my face, they tell me the baby's heart rate is dipping. And I kind of am confused. I haven't eaten in like over 24 hours. I was all drugged up. I was sleeping, I woke up, I was like kind of confused. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on right now. But that was like in the middle of the night, I think Saturday night. We got admitted at 1 p.m. on Saturday. And I think that was the middle of the night. So technically Sunday. He wasn't born until 1 p.m. So a full 24 hours after I was admitted. So I was technically like in labor that full 24 hours plus whatever I was in labor.
And home. You got the epidural at 8 centimeters.
8 centimeters. Yeah. Probably around like 11 p.m., maybe 10 o'clock at night.
And then didn't deliver until 13 hours later.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
And I know because like now everybody that I talk to that has had that same experience, they're like, they rushed me into a C-section. Like they were not allowing it. And I was like, I can't believe that they didn't rush me. I'm so glad they didn't. But most people I know, they're like, they don't like,
they don't mess. Yeah.
They don't let you go that long.
Right. And what you're describing is the classic cascade of interventions. You go to the hospital, you're progressing totally naturally, normally, like textbook, even like every hour, a centimeter. You're probably getting the epidural around transition. And had you not gotten it, if you're already at 8 centimeters, it probably would have been a couple hours later.
Yeah.
But then you get the epidural, which most of us just know, like that's what everybody does. So that's what we do. And then, well, now you need Pitocin because the epidural slows down your labor. which, decreases blood pressure, labor contractions slow, so you're not making as much progress. So then they give you Pitocin. And if you don't know all these things, it's like, okay, well, like you said, doctors know best.
Yeah.
They don't give you full informed consent and say, hey, this could cause fetal decels, baby's heart rate could dip. It could cause all these things, the contractions to stall and space out, and all of these potential complications. They don't do that. They don't give informed consent. So when it happens, you're startled. You're like shocked, like, what's going on? Did I do something wrong? Well, no, your baby's
Right.
just responding appropriately to all of these drugs in your system. And it's now detached from mom. It doesn't know, oh, I'm connected. It's feeling the surges. It's intense. It's trying to maneuver down the birth canal. If you're already 8 centimeters, it's probably now like trying to rotate internally and make all these cardinal movements. But because you're
Right.
immobile, it's having a hard time doing that. It gets scared by all these
Right.
contractions, heart rate dips, or maybe the monitors just slip off. I've had this happen, and everybody rushes in, just like you say, and maybe baby was fine, but the monitor just kind of moved and it looked like the heart rate dropped off the charts. So these are just actually very normal situations in a medicated hospital birth that most moms don't even realize. It's very common to happen.
Yeah.
And so yours didn't end in cesarean, but very often
Yeah.
they will. If they start seeing decels, they can say, okay, we got to go to emergency cesarean right away. And then it's, thank God we saved your baby, because otherwise baby would have died. Well, no, actually, you're just solving the problem you created with all the drugs and the interventions to
Right.
begin with. And so it's a perfect example of that. And most moms don't know any better, as you did. So what
Right.
happened after the birth that, like your husband said, it was temporary relief, but then long-term consequences?
Well, because he was our first, I think we didn't know until we had our second that we were like, wow, like they're really different. Like, I think with our first, he was just like a really fussy baby, like really fussy, like really hard to calm down. That's really the best way I can describe it, is he just was really fussy. Whereas when our second was born, I literally asked the pediatrician if it was safe for him to be sleeping so much. Like, I was like, is this okay? I was concerned for his well-being, because I'm like, this doesn't seem normal to me.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's fine. But
And
our
some people
first
will
was
say, oh, that's just a difference in personality. But I do believe there's an element of the way babies are brought into the world. They then have to work out that trauma if they were born in trauma and
Yes.
stress and fear, and it comes out in colic, it comes out in problems breastfeeding or digesting or bonding, because babies are humans too. They're having a human
Right.
experience, and we can't discount that.
No,
And he also had the meconium in his lungs. So as soon as he was born, they took him from me.
So and
suctioned his lungs.
Jen doesn't remember even fully. She wasn't fully present because of how mentally, physically, and even spiritually exhausting that process was. And when you have certain chemicals in your bloodstream and just
no food.
and no food, you're literally starving, you're dehydrated, and you're working against gravity to try to push the baby out. I was there from watching it from a different vantage point. And, the nurse, not to get too graphic or anything, but the nurse like had her hand in my wife trying to manipulate the cervix, like literally for 20 minutes, 30 minutes,
probably a lot,
maybe even longer.
It was a long
so
time.
It, kind of to back up into your point, not only do I believe the way that the baby is brought into the world, does it affect them because the body keeps score, but it's already been proven, right? Even while they're in the womb, certain things that happen. And then you have this kind of climax of, okay, this is what I'm going into. And when you have, this entire process where there's not only is she starving, dehydrated, on drugs, fluorescent lights, anytime she does get any reprieve, the new nurse on shift walks in and pokes, hey, here to test you. So it's a never end kind of constant disruption of the natural process, I believe, the way God created it to be. it's just constant intervention. And I wouldn't even call it intervention. I'd call it disruption, I guess.
Disturbing.
Yeah, disturbing. And so there's no reprieve.
And then we wonder
Finally-
why baby goes into fetal distress.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
of course.
We're all distressed.
It's so everyone is utterly exhausting.
Yeah.
Not to mention the food at the hospital is horrible, but that's another.
They don't shit.
Yeah, they don't even. But Dad's got
You're
to
not
leave
even allowed.
because I can't. You wouldn't even want to eat it if they allowed you to.
I
But
know.
trust me.
Yeah.
But no, that's another thing. But when Leo was born, they immediately, you know, normally they'll try and put you on mama's bosom to try and get that bond going. But because he was in there so long, they had the meconium and they got into his lungs. So they snatched him from as soon as he was born.
Yeah. They laid him on me for like a second.
Like literally 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And it was like not even on your bosom. It was like, and you were like, what's going on? They took him and I was like, I'm still emotional because I just watched my son born, to add insult to injury. I cannot forget this point. Literally right as soon as he was getting ready to be born, students, like 6 students come in and they were like, hey, it was young men and young women, a few girls. And they were like, hey, do you mind if we're here and kind of watch? And I was like, yeah, whatever. I was so focused on what was going on with my wife. And after that, I felt like, man, it was so violated. Like my wife is in the most vulnerable place that she could ever be. And you have these strangers at the last minute. I just felt like this is not a show or a spectacle, but it took all the sacred moments that we experienced with our second birth. There was no room for that because again, it was just constant disturbance. So they snatched him, they put him under the lamp, they're shoving tubes down his throat to try and suck out poop. And then they're rubbing him. And ever since then, they wouldn't let us leave the 2 days because they wanted to monitor him. And it was just not a fun experience.
Like all of the Billy Rubin tests from the meconium were all coming back like perfect off the charts. They were like, the nurse even said like, I think she at one point asked me like, did he even have meconium in his lungs? Like his first test was coming back like so good. And then fast forward to, I guess it was like a day and a half. We're like, can we go home? Like we're really tired. We want to go home.
They said you can, but you're going to have to leave the baby.
And I was like, well, I'm not going to.
We're not leaving our baby.
Yeah. And sometimes if they see meconium, they do the same protocol as if there was meconium aspiration, which is dangerous. Right. You don't want baby to aspirate. But if there's meconium alone without aspiration, that's not an emergency. But sometimes they treat it the same in a hospital.
I was there when she stuck the tubes down Leo's throat and nothing came out. There was like nothing in the tubes.
Wow. It's just,
like,
it's
really?
just another, so much unnecessary intervention. Like
100%. That was his first experience into the world.
Yeah. And it's so, unfortunately, so normalized in our culture, right? Yeah. But, if he didn't aspirate, you don't have to do anything. If he didn't show signs of distress and like he was having a difficult time breathing or, all of that, it's okay. You wipe the meconium off and you can keep baby with mom. But it's just another example of that over intervention that hospitals do because they're trying to protect themselves from liability. Because if they don't do something and then it turns out, baby aspirated and had gotten an infection, they're liable. But if they over intervene, they're not liable. So unfortunately, that plays back on like you have this experience now that you have to carry with you and baby of all of these interventions and separation and anxiety and trauma that now you're left with. And you have to work through that. And they're not responsible. It's just like, we saved your baby. Thank God.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I think with that is I know that the people that were there were well-meaning. These are not evil people.
Right.
They were just trained a certain way.
Exactly.
And they, with conviction, believe, yes, we're doing something good. I can't imagine if you would have had a home birth, we wouldn't have been there to do all of these things. And this is what helped us really make the decision easier for the second round, because we were still, especially me, I was very nervous of having a home birth as dad, especially what happened the last time,
Right.
But Jen pointed something out really interesting to me, and it got me thinking, is everyone that we asked that I guess would follow the more conventional Western kind of approach, hospital, everyone, when we would ask them questions, it was always, the responses were always interlaced with fear or guilt. What would happen if something happened to your baby? Or what would happen if? Everything is what happens if a worst case scenario occurs. And I understand the sentiment, I really do. But then when we started exploring alternative methods and a more holistic approach, when we would ask, hey, well, we're thinking about maybe still doing a hospital, but they say, if that's what you feel like you want to do, then go for it. And I was like waiting for them to come down with the same guilt and shame or fear, and it just wasn't really present. And so that's when I started to open up as a husband in supporting my wife. And if she hadn't pointed that out, I don't know if I would have noticed it, but I was like, I can't unsee that anymore.
Yeah. And even the meconium is another side effect, or more common, I should say, when you have Pitocin and a medicated birth. Babies going in to feel distress, they tend to release their first bowel movement. So even that is something that's, but they don't trace that back. They don't see the line of how it's all connected. They just assume that, oh, well, what if this happened in a home birth? Well, the reason we don't see it happen much is because it's calm, because we don't have all the drugs and the Pitocin causing stress to baby. And if it does happen, there's protocols for how to treat that as well. And it's much less likely baby will aspirate. But in a state of fear and stress, all these complications are much more likely. And the whole environment and the protocols they enact in a hospital literally just create all of these scenarios that they have to use more interventions to save you from. So, so you start recognizing this, you're processing your birth, and then you find me somehow, I'm assuming online, you buy the e-course. Like what was some of your big takeaways from that as you were learning about this whole different way to do it?
I'm like not really on Instagram that much. So I don't look at things that I don't already follow. Like I don't look at a lot of new things, but somehow you came up as like suggested. The algorithm like got in my head. I wasn't even pregnant at the time. I had Leo, but I wasn't even pregnant with our second yet. And I saw this thing and I saw your name, Pain-Free Birth, and rewind to like, I don't know, probably years before that, we were in like this marriage group and one of the girls was talking about having a pain-free birth. And she was talking about, she had a really bad hospital experience too, but she was saying like, well, maybe I wasn't like believing God enough and this and that. But I was listening and I was like, well, first of all, sister, you can't have a pain-free birth because that's not a thing. She already had her baby. She had a bad experience. I'm not going to say anything. So I was like that, but I always remembered that she thought she could have one. And
how absurd
it's so weird. I was like, I don't understand why she thinks that's a thing, but whatever. And so like, fast forward, I see your handle that says Pain-Free Birth. And I was like, oh, this is one of those people who think the thing. I was like, I'm going to follow her because she's probably weird too. And so like, I start following you. And then I was like, I kind of like this lady. I was like, I like her content. And what really hooked me was your free masterclass of what's in your bag. And honestly, out of the whole course, that was one of my biggest takeaways, the what's in your bag. And when you asked, where do you get your idea of what birth is like? And I'm like thinking everywhere, right? Like I'm 30 something years old. Like I've gotten it all my whole life. And then you're like, you've probably really only gotten it from like, I think you said like maybe 2 or 3 places. I like really stopped and thought like, where am I getting my ideas of what birth is like? And I was able to narrow it down to like 2 or 3 things. So I was like, okay, this lady knows what she's talking about. And so when I narrowed it down, I was like, wow, I cannot believe I just narrowed down 30 something years to like 3 people and like 5 comments that I've ever heard.
Yes, and everything else is just stacking on top of that. And it's just confirming your already learned bias, confirmation bias, but it's all just reinforcing what you already decided based on those original imprints.
Exactly. And so when I heard that, I mean, it really helped me to like unpack like what I believed about birth.
Yes.
And I had already had an experience that wasn't great. And so it really helped me a lot. And the other biggest takeaway from the course, it's honestly probably one of the most simple things, but the most profound for me in keeping a pain-free birth was catching the contractions on the way up.
Mm.
That was like so simple, but so profound, because that's exactly what I did. And that's what kept it like pain-free.
Joke's on us, basically, is what you're trying to say, right? Because I'm not going to lie too. When she was telling me about you, I was like, what? Pain-free birth? Like, get out
That's
of here.
not possible.
Like, that's impossible, right? And I'm sure you get that all the time.
All the time.
But to your point, whether it's marriage or money or health, your beliefs, whether we realize it or not, were fed to you. They didn't originate with us. All behavior is learned behavior. And so when she started challenging that, our values aligned and beliefs aligned, that's when I started questioning again. And I think it's so important for the husband to, I can't imagine for you as the woman to try and explain things alone and not feel supported by your husband during that process has got to be one of the most loneliest things that you could ever feel. And so I think it's utterly important that for anyone listening, definitely get your husband involved and just start having the conversations together and keep an open mind, because it was a world of difference. And now that we've had that experience, anyone that I talk to that is even thinking about getting pregnant, or if they are pregnant, I'm in real estate. Literally, we could be in the middle of me showing a property and someone's pregnant, because I can't not share that experience, because it was such a huge difference. And really, you can't put it into words. You know, it can only be experienced, not explained, I feel, ultimately.
Because, you know, we were unsure about having a home birth. You know, I was like nervous because of everything that happened and horror stories that, you know, the 1 in a million that you hear like didn't go perfectly. And then, you know, I was a little bit scared. But my neighbor was like, well, what do you think about a home birth? And I was like, no, so why would you? That's a weird thing to say. No, thank you. And that same day, Harif, completely unrelated, said, what do you think about a home birth? And I just like stopped and I was like, why are you saying this? Did you talk to our neighbor? I was like, that is no. But then I felt it, like I felt the tug on my heart. And I was like, okay, God, if there's like one more sign, I'll consider it. Right. So fast forward like a week, nothing. And I grab my phone and I get on Instagram, and the first post was your post that said, today is National Home Birth Awareness Day. And I literally was like, all right, I'll do it. I'll do it. But I was like, are you kidding me? I am not getting out of this. So I might as well just go all in.
That's amazing. Harif, what is it you tell couples when they are pregnant? Like what is your word of advice for them?
So at first it was a little weird, right? Because you got this guy I'm a guy
Passionate about birth.
I am so passionate about it because
I love it when
yes, and I never thought
this.
I would be like this, but
you're a birth junkie now. Welcome.
Yes,
to the club.
and like, but you know what'll do it to any guy is watching your wife be completely vulnerable, and you know you can't do anything to help her, nothing, and what you would think in your mind it was supposed to be like, you know, all this expectation of, oh my gosh, it's going to be the most beautiful thing in the world. And I'm going to be in this hospital and I'm going to see my son born. And it's going to be this epic milestone of your life. And it was. And we could still see God in those moments in his grace, despite all the things that occurred. It was, if one of the top moments of my life, but I just remember feeling so powerless, and I can't do anything. And, you know, it was almost like watching someone other than my wife give birth to my son, because she wasn't even she was literally drugged up, dehydrated, and starving. Yeah. And
so disconnected from the experience.
Exactly. I couldn't, and maybe it was a coping mechanism for me to disconnect or whatever, but I did not feel, I was so confused honestly kind of walking away and just kind of thinking, this is not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so,
And you know that feeling that I know that feeling. I've witnessed births and had that feeling where it's like, this is not how it's supposed to be. And it's such a like a sinking feeling. And it just feels like there's nothing you can do, but you just know in your soul, like, this is not how it's supposed to be. And I think what you're really speaking of is trauma, like that husbands, partners experience birth trauma too. And we don't talk about that. We don't put the spotlight on that. It's put on the mom. The mom experiences birth trauma. The baby experiences birth trauma, which is true. But I've had many couples who've experienced what you might not even consider, like they even dismiss their own trauma because they say, well, our outcome was good. Like our baby survived. It was okay in the end. I shouldn't even feel this. Why do I feel this way? But what that feeling of this shouldn't be this way, and witnessing as an observer your wife go through this, truly is traumatizing. And I think we just don't recognize the partner's trauma in these situations enough. And I've affirmed other men who've witnessed this before as well with their wives, because you're at a completely different vantage point, but you're watching the person you love the most go through something so unnatural and disconnecting. And in your spirit, there's just something not right about this, but you can't do anything.
It's so powerful. I never heard it phrased that way, but that's exactly spot on, is that you dismiss your own trauma.
Yeah.
Because as a man, especially in our culture, I feel like that whole birth experience, you're taught, even if it's unconsciously or inadvertently, but also intentionally, that, hey, you just play the background. The doctor is there. I literally, still to this day, this is how brainwashed we kind of were. Jen, this was right around the time of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And
right before.
yeah. But Jen was like, yeah, if it were up to me and we could only have one person in the room, it would be the doula and not you. Oops. And she said that to me, and I was just like, but this is, again, she's speaking because from a perspective of fear, right?
They know better.
They know better. But this is so powerful because beneath all of that, there's a dismissal of the father and husband's role that that God would desire we get to experience in that moment. There's really very few things that, if anything, that is more sacred than that. And so I believe it's God's heart, and it is natural, and it is the way that it was designed, that we draw closer together and the bond is formed even tighter, and that baby is born in that type of environment. And it really is sacred. And so I did dismiss my own trauma. I invalidated my own feelings, and I didn't even feel allowed to feel anything because I didn't want to infringe on what happened with my wife, but the reality was I was dealing with it in silence. Like, I don't even know what to make of all of this, And so, and compare that to what happened with the home birth. I was like, this is how it's supposed to be.
Now, was it hard to convince you to do a home birth, or were you like ready to?
No, he was the one who brought it up.
Oh, wow.
You know what it was? Yes, I was so fearful, though, to pressure Jen in any way, because, again, and it is ultimately, it's your body, like it's not fair for someone to be like, hey, let me suggest what you should do, how to give birth. Right. You know what I mean? Right. I don't want to come off like that, but at the same time, again, we're believers, and it's the way God intends it. There's a experience that God has hidden for you as a gift when you do rely or lean on people that you love and trust. And it's not just because that's how it was before. She had been so conditioned where I was like, babe, what do you think about not getting an epidural? And it was incredible resistance. How dare no, I'm getting an epidural. You don't understand it. That's how it was. So in a way, I was cautious. I didn't want to say anything. I felt like I couldn't really say anything. And that's what I think doesn't get talked about a lot too, is just like you exposed the beliefs around this have been given to you. It didn't originate with you. all of those tentacles and the ripple effect of all of that has an impact on the husband, and how he feels, and then how that impacts the decision-making process and all of it. I don't even know if it's fully quantifiable, but I know that I didn't want to experience the same thing that we experienced before. And I didn't know where we went wrong. And we're so grateful that really that you did step up and say yes to the calling that you have on your life to start posting, because if you didn't post, like we literally would have not even known, we could have had an entirely different experience. And so, yeah, I was open to the idea of having a home birth, but the more I learned about it, then it didn't take much convincing for me to jump on board. The other thing I will say, with our second, I was panicking. I was kind of freaking out because he was coming out so fast. I was literally, and the doula wasn't there, and she ended up getting COVID. So it was like she had to refer us to like a backup doula. And then the midwife was going through something. And then she had like the second one backup had she was sick. And so it was like the third, and I'm panicking to the point where I'm pacing and I don't even realize it. And Jen is like, will you calm down? You're stressing me out. And I was like, oh my God, my wife who's getting ready to have birth is more calm than me. Like, so, no.
I know we haven't even gotten into this birth story yet, because all of this is so good and so relevant. I feel like I think so many couples are going to get so much out of this, and it probably connects and relates to so many other people's lived experience in their labors with, a different kind of labor experience. But tell us about this next birth. So Jennifer, you went through the course, you're learning all this stuff. Like, it's like God's working in your heart and showing you all these things, and he's working in your husband's heart. And you said you didn't even realize you were in labor until contractions were like 2 minutes apart.
Yeah. Yes, I started losing my mucus plug Saturday morning, and this was 5 days past my due date, which was not like shocking, because with our first, I was also 7 days late,
which is totally normal and average,
right? And so I was like feeling so good. I was like cleaning and organizing, and he was like, you don't look like it's your due date. I was like, I know, I feel so good.
Yes.
And I felt like amazing. I was like, I feel like I could be pregnant for like another month or two. Like, and I was huge, I felt so good though.
Very different from the first one.
Yes.
Would you attribute that to like having a different mindset, or did you do something different?
To be honest with you, with my first, I was working up until like maybe about 8 months, and I was sitting a lot, but then I became a stay-at-home mom. And to be honest with you, I was so busy and on my feet and active, chasing after a toddler. I feel like just like being active is what really kept me like feeling so good.
That's great.
Yeah, I do feel like physically, because with my first, I was very swollen towards the end, to the point that's actually why we went to the hospital. I was like, I think something's wrong. And then they're like, no, you're in labor. But I was very swollen, and I was like kind of painful. But yeah, I felt so good. And then I began losing it very slowly, just like with our first. And so I was like, okay, it's going to happen soon. I don't know when, but I felt really good. And then I would feel like these pains, which I now know were contractions. But at the time I was like, this is so weird. I just have these like pains, but then they go away right away. And they only lasted, I don't know, a couple seconds, and they were like hours apart, like nothing to write home about. Right. So then I went to bed Saturday night, slept a full night, felt great, wake up Sunday, same thing kind of going on most of the day. And then at night, I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to go to sleep. I mean, nothing's happening. These contractions, I think, or these like pains, these surges are coming like so far apart. This is like, nothing's happening. My doula's like, yeah, go to sleep. Just try to relax. It doesn't sound like anything, And she's like, maybe you'll wake up in the middle of the night. Who knows? So at like 10 o'clock, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. And I remember I laid down, and I was like, I have to get up. Like, I just was like, I don't feel comfortable. Like, I just couldn't get comfortable. And then I was like, I think it's happening. I think it's going to happen soon. But I still felt amazing. He was in bed with our toddler.
I fell asleep in a race car bed.
He was sleeping in a race car bed. And I literally debated. I was like, should I go get him now? Or should I do this for a while on my own? And I think I maybe made it like 30 minutes. I was like, I kind of just wanted to like be alone. And then I went and got him and I was like, it's happening. You have to get up. It's happening. And so then we, just kind of go in our room. And then I think I went in the shower pretty quickly and I just like used the wand over my stomach. And it was so like relieving. I felt like, oh, this is so good. And I remember in the shower, now I know what was happening. But at the time I was like, had this kind of like, okay, I think the baby was trying to get out, but I didn't know it. It was just like this like push. But I was like, oh my God, that was like so weird. That must have been like a contraction. And so, but looking back now, I know that it was my body was pushing, but it didn't hurt and it felt fine. And he was like, I need to call the midwife.
No, we're skipping one step. I was timing when she was having these feelings. And I'm like timing them like
he's doing air quotes for those of you.
Yes. Yeah, I have air quotes. The truth is with our first, she was having quote unquote gas pains for 2 days. And I said, if you're having gas pains on the third day, I'm taking you into the hospital. And she's literally on a yoga ball in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning, moaning. I'm like, are you sure this is gas? She's like, yes, it's gas. I'm like, okay.
Nothing's coming out.
So yeah, she's taking Beano or whatever it was. It was reminiscent of the last time that she didn't really know. So I started timing the contractions. I said, hey, every 2 minutes you're having these weird feelings, quote unquote. So it's time to call everybody because we were supposed to do this when they were 10 minutes apart. And so we did, and I'll let Jen continue the story.
I feel like it went from
0 to 60.
Really like big, like hours or an hour, like really big time lapse in between. And then once I got in the shower, I think it was around that time that I was like, it was happening more, but it didn't feel like 2 minutes. But it really did go from like a big space to like quick. And so he's like, I'm going to call them. And I even said, they're not going to come because I feel fine. And after the contraction and the wave, I was like talking and I was, it wasn't like a big deal. And I was like, I don't think this is what labor is like. I think I'm supposed to not be able to talk and I don't know. And so he's like, I'm going to call them. And then that's when we found out basically everybody was unavailable. Everybody was sending their backup. And so the doula who ended up coming, I've never met her before. And she was like just this angel of light who came into my house at 2 a.m.
Yeah, because our doula, when we called her, she had COVID that morning or she found out she had COVID that morning and she was like, hey, don't give birth today because I have COVID. Ha. And that night, obviously, the way God ordained it, it happened exactly the way that it was supposed to. But I remember while she was in the shower, I'm calling I'm freaking out, honestly, at this point, because the midwife, Jen is like, I feel like he's coming out. And I'm literally telling her, I'm like, hold up, close your legs, hold him in there. And she's like, I don't know if I can do that. And so I'm panicking. I'm not going to lie. I'm just like, it's happening so fast. And I called the midwife and she's like, I'm 75 minutes away. So if you have to give birth before I arrive, I was like, time out. Let me stop you right there. That's not happening. We're going to wait for you to arrive and then we can give birth. And then she's like, I hear you, but if it does happen, and this is what I need you to do. And I'm like, God, this cannot be happening to us right now. But so she ended up calling the doula who had COVID and she was kind of coaching her to breathe. There was a moment where she was like, I don't think I could do this, but she was just supporting her, giving her words of encouragement, and something instinctually in Jen told her to kick on the bathtub. She's like, fill up the bathtub. And so we fill up the bathtub and her body, she wanted to get in the bathtub. And so she's literally in the bathtub
No, you're skipping a couple steps, but
oh, okay.
our doula was coaching us over the phone. And this is, I feel like, an important part for some people. I was standing my entire labor. Like I stood my entire labor. I tried to sit down on the yoga ball and immediately I was like, ow. And now I know it's because he was so low, but I was like, I was standing and that was the most comfortable position for me. And the doula did tell him to get the bed ready with like, you know, the towels and the liners and all that. She's like, just in case she wants to lay down. And I was like, yeah, go ahead. But like, I knew the whole time I wasn't going to lay down, but I was like, yeah, just go ahead and do it anyway, you know? And then I had my space to, you know, to be in the bathroom, standing on the sink, you know, like, or standing over the sink, but I knew it was too uncomfortable for me to lay down. And then so she sent her backup, who was also far away, and she only made it 20 minutes before I gave birth. So that's the part I was going, where she came in and just kind of was like super calm. And I was like, okay, if something was wrong, she would probably be freaking out. So I should be calm too then. So I was like continuing, but I was like, I have to poop right now. I was like, I have to poop right now. I was like, and she's like, okay, just go in the toilet. And then I sat down and I was like, it was very painful because he was so low, but I was like, okay, I don't actually have to go to the bathroom really. And we heard like this loud pop. And I didn't know that it was my water breaking. And she kind of checked me. All the lights were off. We just had a couple candles lit, but she like turned on a light and looked, and she was like, everything's fine. You know, it's good. It was just like some mucus or something. I was like, okay, whatever. And so we turned the lights back off. And that's when I stood up and I like just knew. It was like a movie. I was like, I have to get in the tub right now. And I'm like,
when you know,
I had to get in the tub because we had it filled for a while. And I was like, I have to get in right now. And then that's when everything happened.
Three pushes. I want to highlight one of the things during the course that she had mentioned that it was foreign to me, but it resonated with me. And she was mentioning how important it was to basically go to the place where you can express your desire to God about how you want this experience to go. And she had it all planned out in her head that she wanted it to occur while our son was sleeping, and that he would wake up and meet his little brother. We had candles lit, very different from fluorescent light bulbs with people poking and prodding and all of these things, right? And she's in the warm bathtub. We have candles lit. We have worship music playing, and our son is sleeping, and the doula and myself are there supporting Jen while she's going through the natural process. And she played a song, which I'll let you share, because it'll tie back into it. You can do it. And it was the most sacred, beautiful thing I'd ever experienced in my life, is watching it during this moment. But why don't you share that, babe?
So I was hibernating in my room for all of Sunday. So labor kind of started Saturday morning, and then Sunday morning is when I was like, I just like need to be alone. So that was a big difference from my hospital birth, where, you know, there was a lot of people and commotion and all that, like he said, fluorescent lights. I basically hibernated, kind of like you talk about, like an animal, like you go and you hide and you give birth. And that's exactly what I did. I went in my room and I hid from the world, and it was amazing. And it was so calm. And that's how I was able to breathe through my contractions and everything. And anytime I would leave my room, which was not often, and my toddler would pull at me, or there was commotion downstairs, I would feel the pain of the contraction. I would be like, oh my God, ow, 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 you know? And then, so I went back upstairs and I was like, I hid, you know, I hid in the quiet, dim room. I ate, I drank,
which is so amazing how you recognize, like, oh, when people are pulling on me and causing me this distraction, and you know, I have to avert take care of a baby. Like the contractions actually feel more painful.
100. It was night and day.
Did you know you were having contractions though?
At that point, yeah, because that was like Sunday evening.
She wasn't in denial by then.
yeah, I wasn't in denial anymore. But it was still so far apart that I was like, I think these are contractions, but they're not that painful if I catch him on the way up. But when I
Yeah.
couldn't do that because I have mommy, it was very painful. And so I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to get away. So I went back upstairs and I was just playing like these two songs over and over. I actually forget what the second one was now, but the first one is a song that's very near and dear to my heart. It's ministered to me for a long time, even before I had kids. It's Catch the Wind by Melissa Helzer. And it's just, there's a line in the song. Actually, I think it's the first line. And she says, I'm strong and full of life. And it's her song of her own testimony of healing and this beautiful story that she has. I've listened to it over and over and over. And so I was listening to this song and I was just kind of soaking in it. So then when you fast forward to 2 a.m. and I got in the tub, and I was like on my knees because that was the most comfortable position for me. Just FYI, I tried a few other positions I saw in some videos and I was like, those didn't work for me. And I just instinctually got on my knees and I just knew like in the bathtub that this is like how I was meant to give birth. And it was just like, yeah, I don't think we had the music playing at that time because it was really quiet. But it just like bubbled up out of my soul. And it was like the weirdest thing. It's like nothing that I ever do. Like I don't sing or say things like that. And I was just on my knees and I just like belted out this lyric. I was just like, I am strong and full of life, but I kind of sang it, you know, and him and the doula were both like, yeah. You know, and then I was like, okay, we're doing this, you know, and then my body, I had the fetal ejection response, which was amazing. And he just came out, you know, like with 3 pushes.
Yeah, you were, but how I remember it was not only did she started singing the song, I'm strong and full of life. And then as a contraction was coming, like, I'm going to catch the wind. I can't sing, but I'm going to catch the wind. Yeah, I remember her saying that, and just the way that she desired the entire experience to go is exactly how it occurred. And so to your point, and how powerful the mind is and the emotions and how we can set the tone for how things happen. We're not a victim of this. God has given us the power to set the environment, so to speak, and make a declaration and be bold and sharing your desire, because I realize that could be risky for some people, because you don't want to seem like, oh, well, I'm telling everyone this, or I'm telling my husband that, and then it doesn't go that way.
Or get your hopes up. Yeah.
Yes, it requires faith. Yes. And it was so beautiful to see that. I'll never forget that. Till my dying breath. It was the most beautiful, sacred thing ever. And she was progressing so quickly that I was like, hey, don't push him out too fast. His head's going to hit the bottom of the tub.
I'm like, he's fine.
Oops.
He's fine.
Sorry. Oh. And so, yeah. And in 3 pushes, he came out and our son was born into the most peaceful.
And you got to catch him.
Yeah. I got to catch my son and raise him out of the water. Yeah. And he didn't even cry. Oh. It was such an experience, so different. He didn't even cry. He was utterly at peace and was born into this place where there's worship music playing. The lights are dim, but there's candles burning. He's in the warm bathtub with mama and immediately embraced by mom. And I was behind Jen and we just laid down, and the doula let us soak up every second of that precious moment. And then the placenta came out. A little bit, like 20, 30 minutes later.
I don't even think that long, but I had kept saying beforehand, I was like, do you want to come in the tub with me? He's like, no, I don't want to go in the tub with you. It's going to be like, all bloody and stuff.
Yes.
And so it's funny because the water was perfectly clean because it happened so fast.
Right.
Yeah. And then like he gives me the baby, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, he's in the tub. I was like, in a moment of passion, he climbed in the tub. I was like, you didn't even think you were going to do that. And then we were just sitting, like monkeys. It was like him. And
I can picture it.
And then, unfortunately, we didn't get many actual photos because it was dark and it happened so fast, but the doula took a couple that you have. But the midwife got there 6 minutes after he was born. And so
Wow.
we were still in the tub and I was like, you missed it. You missed the whole thing, just joking with her. And it's funny how we go back to our prior experiences, because when he was coming out, it did feel, like tight at first. And I was like, I literally looked at the doula and I said, somebody needs to cut him out of me, because with our first, I had an episiotomy.
You
And
had all the interventions with that one.
I had all the interventions. I forgot about that one. And at first I said no in the hospital. And then I said, will it help him come out faster? And she said, yes, like absolutely yes. And even my doula at that point was like, go ahead. Like, because it was rough, I had been there for a while. So they did. And then he came out right away. So in my mind, when I felt him coming like that, I was like, he's not going to be able to get out unless somebody cuts me again. And I remember the doula looked at me and she just goes, you're going to push your baby out. Like nobody's cutting you. And she's not even authorized to do that, I don't think.
No.
So she was like, no. And so, and then
isn't that crazy how the mind will play tricks on you? And you're like, if you believe that thought, your body will tense and prevent baby from coming out. But as soon as you believe, no, I'm going to open and push this baby out, it happens.
Yeah. And then he did, and he just came right out. And then when the midwife got there, we were waiting for the placenta. And I asked her if she could pull it out, because in the hospital, that's what they did.
Yeah, the placenta.
And I didn't know that you're not supposed to do that.
Right.
And thankfully, I didn't have any complications from her doing that. But I remember in the hospital, she kind of like tugged at it and then it came out. So I asked her, because I was ready to get out of the tub. I was like, can you pull on it? And I remember she goes, no, I'm not going to do that. And I was like, why? I don't understand. That's like what helps it come out faster. And she was like, you're going to deliver the placenta. It's going to be fine. There's no bones. It's the easy part. And then I think just a few minutes later.
Yeah.
And
it comes when it's ready. Yeah, it comes when it's ready.
And then this is the another incredible thing about having a home birth is you get to tailor it to how you want it to be, right? So we literally now, after the placenta's out in a wooden salad bowl, if you're envisioning this, that we don't use anymore. Don't worry, guys.
Favorite picture ever. But the placenta on the bed in a salad bowl.
Yeah, I was like,
so prepared, but that was one thing that I didn't know I was supposed to have, was a bowl. I had everything else. I had like 90 hospital blankets. I bought them on Amazon. I had like everything. And then they're like, where's the bowl? I was like, that was not on the list.
So they went a wooden salad bowl. But then we got to, carry Max into the bed, and we just laid down, and I watched as my wife had this like runner's high, it felt, right? Like she was so radiant and full of energy. Yeah. The complete opposite of what happened while she was in the hospital. And you would think, as a man, I'm like, okay, she's gonna be utterly exhausted afterwards. But it was like, I guess, this oxytocin and serotonin, just all of it. And literally we're belly laughing. We're talking with the doula. We're talking with the midwife. She's checking everything. And we're in the comfort of our own home, in the comfort of our bed. And, they were just so loving and caring after that. And, made food and had threw stuff in the laundry while we just got to relax and bond with our baby and with each other. And that's something that you just can't have in the hospital. And so if you have, I'm not a doctor, but if you have medical complications or whatever, like, I get it if you can't do it, but if you are able-bodied and healthy, take Karen's course. You'll be glad you did, and experience, honestly, the way birth was intended. Yeah.
That's hearing you describe that, all I can think is like, as it should be. That's as birth should be, like this incredible sacred bonding time, a room full of love and oxytocin to welcome your baby. And we just distort it so much with fear and complications and interventions. But that, when you strip all of that away, like, that is how birth is designed to be. That is like, what better way would you want to bring a child into the world than in that room filled with love and peace.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of, literally, if I try to think of a better way, I could not think of one. And it really truly was exactly how, and I'm so thankful for the gift of you setting the tone during that time of, hey, don't be afraid to share your desire on how you want this experience to go. Because
Yeah.
when she set intention, literally, then we fell asleep and we woke up and we got to introduce Leo to Max. And he's the
Oh.
best big brother. And yeah, we're just so grateful. It's incredible.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I mean, just what an incredible story. What would you say to other dads who are scared, who've had maybe a traumatic birth experience or witnessed one,
Yeah.
and they're just nervous on how to support their wife, how to be present for this birth? What would you say to encourage them?
I would tell them, keep an open mind, and coming alongside your wife and sharing your intention first and foremost, maybe where you can take some measure of ownership and just say, hey, listen, the last time I felt like, or if this is your first time, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to expect. How could I support you? How can I help you? What do you want this experience to look like? She's probably never been asked those questions before. And I think it'll get her starting to think, hey, what do I want, and why? And, obviously, if your wife is even a little bit open to a home birth, then I would say, hey, I came across this podcast or Karen's page, and I paid for it. And would you be open to taking this, just hearing it, and keeping an open mind, and just having that door open as an invitation to hopefully share with her that there's other ways that she might not be aware of, that she can have this birth. And so I think our role as a father and as a husband is to be supportive, but also to, I think that looks like asking more questions than it is maybe telling them what you want, and that would be my biggest thing. So I think there's two extremes. One is being silent. Hey, whatever you want to do, babe. The passive guy, the passive husband, whatever you want to do. Okay, you want to have a house? Okay, no problem. And that's not really, I think, what she needs. And then there's the other extreme of, hey, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And you could be too extreme, but I think finding that middle ground where again, the intention is for you, hopefully, to anybody listening to this, my desire and hope for you would be that you get to experience the sacred bond that could occur during this experience that I don't believe could happen under any other circumstances. There's nothing like it. And it really is one of the most important things that you could ever experience as a couple. So she's worthy of the pursuit, and asking those questions. And there's a gift for you as well in this whole process, if you'll lean in and press in and not be passive or not be too controlling, but finding that middle ground. That's the best way I could explain it.
That's beautiful. And I know, Jen, you expressed you were going through a rough time in your marriage. What did this birth experience do for you in your marriage?
Oh, what a loaded question. At that time, like right before our son was about to be born, we were in Discord. And I was just thinking like, this isn't, sorry. I was like, this isn't how it was supposed to be, And then I was like cramming your course in because I waited till the last minute. And I was listening and I came across the module where you were talking about your marriage right before you gave birth, and how it wasn't how it was supposed to be, and how even through that, you still were able to basically have, the birth that you were meant to have, and your husband was still there and he was still supporting you. And maybe your marriage wasn't exactly where you would have wanted it to be when you were giving, birth, but that it's still like that God still worked everything to write a beautiful story. And I feel like that's exactly what happened with us. Like we were like not getting along, and it was, we were even that Sunday morning before he was born, sitting at a coffee shop talking about who knows what, but some problem. And that I was like, we have to settle this argument before I give birth. And we did. And who even knows what it was? It probably wasn't even important, but I just remember kind of having that tension and then being like, this is not how I imagined having this beautiful second experience. It was supposed to be so different. And then the way everything played out, it really was like so beautiful in the midst of, some trials that we were going through at the time. And so I was so thankful. I was like, I can't believe she shared all that in her course. Like, it was so vulnerable and it was so personal. And I was like, I never thought I'd have the chance to tell you like how much it meant to me, like truly.
Just to put the icing on the cake, it was so cool how, again, it was just one of those moments. Everyone's going to think like everything is horrible with our marriage. It's not. But
I think it's relatable. We all go through those times.
Yes, exactly. If you're human, you know. But we met you at an event where it was one of those challenging times. And we moved heaven and earth to like get there. And we had no idea that you would be there. And we were sitting a couple rows behind you, and Jen nudges me like, hey, that's a pain-free birth. And I was like, what?
That's your name. I was like, that's the lady.
That's pain-free birth. And I just knew that it was, again, just providence. It was God smiling, and it wasn't coincidental. But the fact that we were able to share our story with you and get to now, there's so many stories that you probably don't even know the lives that you touched. And people that, me showing while I'm showing real estate properties to buy your course, and then we never hear from these people, but their lives were changed. It really is so profound and powerful, the message that you've committed to sharing, because not only have we been impacted, but everyone in our sphere as well will be impacted. And these will be the stories that you never hear, maybe this side of glory, but all these babies that are being born in such a different environment because of it. It's really is. It's sacred and a huge blessing. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. I'm like tearing up. That warms my soul. It's why I do what I do. And you're right. There's so many stories I'll never hear. Even the ones that come in, I can barely keep up with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem. And wow. It's such a powerful thing to know, like I'm walking out my calling. This is a message that women need to hear. And he's brought me back to that several times, especially this year, is make the main thing the main thing. Share the message that birth doesn't have to be scary and painful. And I just have to honor him and be obedient, because I know the impact it's had not only on my births, but on everyone I work with, and the stories that come in. And you guys are a living testimony of that. And it's not about me. It's about him. It's the way he created our bodies to birth. It's God's design. It's the way he intended us to birth and raise our families and do it in a place of love and peace and joy, and start a family on that frequency, not in fear. And that's, I'm just the mouthpiece, but I so appreciate your words, because it just gives me fresh motivation to share even more. And
I'm thankful that you had me on too, because again, the opportunity that it gives, I don't know how many times you hear it from the man's perspective. And so, again, I cannot, as a father and husband, emphasize enough how it has impacted me. And the first time around where I dismissed my trauma, now I get to have an entirely different experience, because of it. So it's multifaceted, and truly our sons are very, very different. And, while God is orchestrating all things ultimately for our good and his glory, there's a marked difference between the two. And so it's just, everyone gets better when when you get to go on this journey.
Yeah.
It's just so much different.
And I love how God, even in the midst of experiencing a traumatic birth, that he brings redemption and he brings healing, sometimes in ways we don't even expect, through, whether that's through a healing birth or, I know your first son is going to experience those moments too, where God heals that
Yes.
trauma or that anxiety that's in his heart, and just
Yes.
through that love and bonding that you guys now carry as parents and as a family, bringing God's light into your family. So
That might be another division of the pain-free birth, is seriously, because it is something that I don't feel entirely equipped. And until you even said this, where you said you dismissed your trauma, I didn't even realize that's exactly what I did. But, I feel like we need some coaching for that too. So if you launch that, we'll be the first ones who,
healing
to
from a
sign up.
traumatic birth. Yes.
Yeah, how to be healed from a traumatic birth. Yeah, 100%.
Well, I do have a mini course on that.
Sign up. Okay.
I mean, I don't have one for the partners, but for the women, I help you release it somatically from your body, because our body keeps the score.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's usually, from someone coming off of a traumatic birth and then preparing for a new birth experience,
Wow.
because sometimes you need some deeper somatic release in order to really allow that the trauma in your body to be released before you can prepare for the good one. Otherwise, you kind of carry a lot of that with you. And it's so prevalent, unfortunately. And I saw the need for it. Like, oh, we're just carrying around trauma from all these birth experiences. But yeah, I do have that. But maybe you're inspiring me and giving me an idea for
and
helping the partner. Really
part two of that. So you have the partner and the child.
Yes.
Because I don't know.
And I do share in there. There is some prayers in there that I include on helping your child release the trauma and how you can actually facilitate that after the baby is born, whether that's like in the postpartum season, if there was separation, or even if they're older. I've had women who will like lay their hands on their babies when they're sleeping and release and declare things over them that allow their babies, because their spirit is alive, right? Even if their like conscious mind doesn't understand, the trauma is often in our subconscious. And so we can minister to their spirits and allow even our children to release, as we pray over them, to release that fear and that trauma. Because that fear, as parents, that fear will manifest in different areas of their life.
100%.
And you can support that and allow them because the babies will tell their story through crying or through this colic that we call it. We put a label on it, but that's kind of, it's either like digestive nutritional things, or it could be emotional. I'm not saying all colic is like trauma based, but a lot of it is. And as children, then we just learn coping mechanisms of like, well, now we're going to get afraid every time we're in a new situation, or we're going to, not take any risks, or, whatever it is. Even in, quote unquote, good births, I think our babies pick up stuff. They pick up our own fears. They pick up how they were handled, how they were treated, how they were, touched. All of that is being imprinted on them from such a young age. And we as parents, and of course we're going to experience trauma in life. We can't feel bad and beat ourselves up over it. But the amazing truth is that God gives us this incredible responsibility to love our kids and be a conduit of healing for them.
Amen.
And he'll show you how, even if you don't know, like he'll show you and give you this like spark of intuition that just says, I feel like I need to pray over my son right now. And, what do I declare? And he'll just show you like downloads of like, your son really needs this to release this or break this off. Or even if it's like connected to a spiritual thing. I think as parents, I'm still learning that too. There's ways our kids need us, and they're also unique.
Wow.
That's so powerful and beautiful. Yes, we're excited to
delve into that.
Yes. Appreciate you guys. This has just been incredible. Thank you for sharing with our listeners and with our community your experience, and how I'm taken away from this, like that even as a husband, but for both of you, for your whole family, that this is such a sacred experience. And I love that you have emphasized that word so much and what it meant to you to witness your wife in this. And I think it's also so interesting that in your first birth, you talked about how there was all these people, and Harif, you just felt like like you were almost dismissed, like not even relevant in the labor experience because of all the doctors and all the interns, and your voice didn't matter. And it was just like, okay, let the doctors do their thing.
Mhm.
And then in your second birth, your midwife didn't even make it. Your original doula didn't make it. And
It was
it's
just me and him.
you
That
and
was
him
it. Yeah.
and a backup doula that gave you that space and
Yes.
allowed you to bond. But really it was just you two, and the redemption of God even in that is so beautiful.
Yeah. That would be my message to the fathers, is that you don't have to be just a spectator, but you can participate in this beautiful experience. And that's how God designed it. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Oh, that's a perfect place to land this. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you for sharing your story. And I hope this blessed you guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pain-Free Birth Podcast. If you were encouraged, it would mean so much if you left us a 5-star review and shared this with your community. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at Pain-Free Birth. And to learn more about the Pain-Free Birth e-course, free resources, private coaching, and upcoming events, find out more at painfreebirth.com. See you next week.